We welcome Sean Fitz from Blue White Illustrated on three's Penn State site. It's been a busy week for you, Sean. Penn State loses to Michigan. James Franklin fires offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich on Sunday. And I got to ask you, because I was at the game, and I have never heard fans of a good team boo the offensive play calling in the first quarter of a big game until Saturday.
Yeah, I mean that is the first quarter of a big game, the second of two big games with Ohio State and Michigan, and Ted Lasso season 1 season finale. It's the hope that kills you. Penn State fans had hope that this was the team that was going to get them over the hump, and I think they matched up well with Ohio State. And if they had a semblance of an offense, you never know what's going to happen there, and they didn't. And this is kind of where they found themselves in the first quarter on Saturday. No points. The points are what gives you hope. You can lose a game 45-38 and you still feel like you're just one or two plays away. Against Michigan, against Ohio State, you never thought, even when it was a 4-point game for most of that Ohio State game, you still felt like the little brother who's being held at arm's length when the big brother just kind of gets him and just sort of has their way with him in a fight. Like that's kind of where you're at with that if you're a Penn State fan. And to see the lack of continuity, to see the lack of I've been saying purpose for a couple of weeks now, it wasn't there. And it settled on Mike Yurcich because that's the guy that got fired, but it starts at the top of James Franklin. Yurcich, certainly the way that they're playing the call, or the way that they're calling the game was not something that gave people much. They've seen that before, if that makes sense. And then beyond that, the execution from the player level, I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the 3 and outs are incredibly frustrating. But the thing that I noticed is sort of mid-game, they'd have a nice, successful play on first down. Like there was a sequence where they gained 9 yards on first down, lose 1 on second, get none on third, punt, and then the next one was actually the touchdown drive, but they had to convert 2 fourth downs because they were so bad on second and third down. And it's like, I don't know, it felt like a little bit of lack of creativity. Like instead of on second and 1, that's where you cut it loose because what do you have to lose? They're like, no, we're going to try to get that 1 yard. And Michigan was like, okay, we're not letting you get that 1 yard.
You're going to try and get that 1 yard by throwing a, little banana there to the sideline. And like your horizontal approach is going to give the defense time to make that tackle for loss is what it ended up being, to a receiver who I think has caught 1 ball this year. So like there's just so many things. It's like, you talk about 4D chess and things like that, and you're just completely off the board trying to outsmart the other guy. And I mean, that's a pretty smart defensive coordinator on the other side. But it's a situation that we had and I just talked about this on our show at Blue White Illustrated. There was an exchange here where in our in-game thread, that exact sequence happened. And some guy is mad, says, well, that's so predictable. And someone came back, no, it's not. It's not predictable. And that's the problem. It's so far gone and not in a situation where you're catching the other person off guard. You're doing something that isn't going to work.
Jesse Mentor, the Michigan defensive coordinator, is like, thank you for that. Because on second and 1, the playbook is wide open. You can do literally anything. And that is the worst thing you can possibly do.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. And you saw that with the 2-point conversion there at the end where you're running a swinging gate, muddle huddle, whatever you want to call it. Who are you trying to outsmart? Who do you feel that you are so deficient in your offense that you have to go with this? You have to go with the trick play. Penn State has gone to a lot of trick plays this year, halfback option passes. They threw a throwback to Drew Allar this week on 4th down. That is, to me, that's coaching scared. Like, to me, that is acting like you don't think that you have the horses to do it. And maybe you don't have the weapons on the outside to get it done. But at the same time, like if you're in that situation where you think you need a trick play in the second quarter or a flea flicker in the third quarter to just get a limited amount of points, then you're kind of already there, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you look at the other side of the coin in that game, you have a team that ran the ball 32 consecutive times. Like it's funny because I have this conversation with coaches. And there are a few that will do this, and the Jim Harbaugh tree is certainly, they all do this, but not many coaches actually do this where they just keep running the thing that works until you stop it.
And what's interesting about that is they weren't running extremely well. They averaged 3.6 yards a carry, 13 plays in the third quarter,
Yeah.
47 yards, one of three on third down. I mean, that's not that is not a killer offense by any stretch of the imagination. 17 plays, 70 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, but that included a 30-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. So
Mhm.
you ran 30 plays for 117 yards in the second half. I mean, they did it because they could just keep them at arm's length. This is Kirk Ferentz taking a safety in a 6-4 game because he's not scared of Penn
Yeah.
State's offense. You're not scared of that. How many times do you see Michigan go down and play for a field goal as they did, in the second half in the third quarter there? How many times do you see them go down and essentially play for a field goal because you think if you're winning by 8 or we're winning by 7 or whatever it was at that point, if you're winning by
It
one
went from
score,
5 to 8 with the field goal.
you have an extreme advantage, and I think that's the frustrating part. If you're James Franklin, if you're Manny Diaz, who,
Yeah.
who is kind of on the hook for that whole they didn't throw in the second half thing, but at the same time, your defense wasn't bad. Like it wasn't a situation where you were just getting crumbled like you did in 2022 at the Big House. So it was a fascinating game just because Michigan was not scared of Penn State's offense.
Yeah, and what they did also is you have a quarterback who's not in rhythm. What's the best way to keep him out of rhythm? Don't let him have the ball. And they were taking it wasn't even because they were, running as successfully as you mentioned. They were taking so much time, not just time of game, but actually physical time where he had to stand there on the sideline.
Yeah, it was an incredible. I thought that game was under 3 hours, and it should have been without TV
Yeah.
timeouts because you were there on Saturday. I mean, you're going
Yeah.
from touchdown, timeout, kickoff, timeout, guy gets hurt, time. I mean, it was unbelievable how they
It
got
was
those
it was a
commercials.
big noon game that ended before all the other games that kicked off before it.
And it was artificially like inflated in terms of game time because of the
Yeah.
TV stuff, and it was that it was a service academy game is what it was, and
Yeah. Yeah.
credit to Michigan for coming out and doing exactly what they thought they would do, but like I mean they were 3 of 8 on third downs in the second half, so like yes they did a little bit of stay on the field, but that's a team that was 55% on third downs for the season. Like they didn't live up to their standard and their expectation from there. It's just without being threatened on the other side, how do you approach this?
So Jaywan Sider, Ty Howell take over the play calling. They were the co-offensive coordinators under Yursich. Do you expect to see anything different these last couple of games? They're playing a pretty good defense in Rutgers this week.
Yeah, Rutgers does have a good defense. I think kind of the flip side of what we just saw with Michigan is I don't know that Penn State fears Rutgers scoring a ton of points, but you never know what can happen. It's November in the Big Ten. Yeah, I mean it's a situation where you're not going to change the offense in 2 weeks or whatever they have. They've got Rutgers and then Michigan State next Friday at Ford Field. But I think you feel like they made this move because you just got to get a jump start on the next guy, obviously, but also because these next two defenses you play are not going to threaten you in the sense that Michigan or Ohio State are going to. So I expect more of the same, but you've got a running backs coach calling the plays. You've got a tight ends coach calling the plays. Penn State has good tight ends. We think they have good running backs. They haven't played up to what we believe to be their potential. And actually, to be honest, what we saw from them last year. So I think a lot of running, a lot of, November Big Ten football coming your way with running backs and tight ends and things like that, because Penn State, I just don't know that they have the option to kill you on the outside. And you haven't seen it, but I do expect them to try and get Drew Allar into a rhythm, try and do some short throws to start the game, make him a little bit more comfortable, and then maybe give him a little bit of a longer leash. He saw against Maryland 2 weeks ago, they scored 51 points, and he was a big part, like his comfort level. That was a big part of why they were able to have success on offense. Not that they fixed anything, but at the same time, like it was more enjoyable to watch from a coverage standpoint, from a fan standpoint, from just basically anybody around that game outside of Mike Loxley. It was more fun to watch that Penn State team than the two that played the big games and laid eggs in the big games.
So as they move into the new Big Ten, where you add UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon, you take away divisions. What kind of offensive coordinator should they be looking for that conference?
It's going to be fascinating to watch the Pac-12 teams and the style that they play, because they're not going to change in the first year. Like how they score points and how they're able to, you want to say no defense or whatever, but it's going to be a different formula than the traditional Big Ten teams. So you've got to keep it open. You've got to, I'm not saying you have to recruit an offensive coordinator around Drew Allar, but like this is your guy that you're trying to figure out, or you're trying to vault your own program as a quarterback producer, a quarterback recruiter, things like that. So this guy means a great deal to what they're trying to do. But I don't know. Penn State's identity, I think, is always going to be running the football. But that's not necessarily how they've scored their points over the last decade. You look back to when Joe Moorhead was here, there was a great deal of success and balance. There was a great deal of that. And James Franklin wants to be balanced. He wants to run the quarterback, but I don't think it's a be all end all thing. So yeah, I don't know. I looked at a bunch of, if you would call them potential candidates or possibilities, if you will, and you could go a number of different ways with this. The problem that I see is you're not going to fix the deficiencies that you have on the outside just in one round of portal or in one round of recruiting. Like Penn State still has a lot of issues on the outside, so can't go to a spread them out air raid or something like that. I know Wisconsin's had their issues this year with a similar change. So
they didn't have the personnel to run it.
Right. And you can't just flip that. I mean, I know it sounds great, but you can't go out and sign a free agent here.
Well, yeah. And now, interestingly enough, Joe Moorhead's a short drive away in Akron. Penn State can probably pay him more than Akron does, but I guess that's just a matter of, do you want to still be a head coach or do you want to go back to being a coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, and Akron's very tough place to win, and he has not really done much of it. And I think that's a tough place for anybody that is trying to win football games. But yeah, Moorhead makes sense. Like Moorhead makes sense in the sense that he could be he's one of the guys that we highlighted as a possibility on Blue Wade Illustrated. He's one of the guys that you just keep hearing that name come up because, in part because he has shown production. He has done a pretty good job, but also harkens on the glory days of 2016 when you win a Big Ten title with him. I mean, that was the one guy that was able to get them over the hump to play Ohio State well. He beat Ohio State when he was at Oregon, if you want to give him the credit for that, you want to give somebody, I don't know, but the result is the result there. So there's some familiarity there. And I think my biggest thing with Moorhead is when he came in 2016, he said, "Hey, I got the offense. Just let me take care of it." And I think that is exactly what they need. They need a head coach of the offense. I think Manny Diaz does a really good job of that on the defensive side of the ball, and it's worked for them. So you have James do his thing, his CEO thing, and you've got two head coaches that can make it work, one on offense, one on defense. All of a sudden, you've got a formula for a team that can maybe get over that hump. You never know. Divisions are going away, schedules changing, but with that 12-team playoff, you get a little bit more leeway there.
So I was driving back to my hotel after the game, Sean, and I stop at a sports bar to watch some of the other games and get something to eat. And I'm sitting there at the bar, and there's a guy across the bar from me. He's wearing his Penn State jersey, and I hear him say this. And I'm curious how many of your subscribers are saying this right now, because it shocked me to hear it. And the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I kind of get it. He said, "I'd give anything to have Sean Clifford back right now."
Wow. That's go back a year and say that and see what Penn State fans say. Sean was so good at getting everybody in the right place. Like Sean would go up to the line and he had that level of trust. He was a 4th-year starter. He was a guy that, I don't want to say have that ESP, but he was able to know what the coordinator was thinking, know what the coach was thinking, know what the defensive coordinator was thinking, because he'd seen all of it. And you were that comfortable with it. And you were that comfortable with making him, even though sometimes the throws did not go where he wanted the throws to go, he still put them in the right general area. And like he made the right reads and did all that kind of stuff. So yes, Drew's more talented. Like there's, you can see some of the throws he makes. Sean is like classically underappreciated because of the way that most of his, just because he was here so long.
Yeah.
But I think it's more the trust thing. It's more the pre-snap thing. It's more of the getting guys in spots and not being confused. And like, there's a lot of dummy calls that have gone, pre-snap for Penn State this year just to confuse a first-year quarterback. That's what everybody does against first-year quarterbacks. And Penn State has fallen into that trap just because they didn't have the guy to think on the fly. And that's not a cut at Drew, but he just hasn't seen it as much.
And it's interesting because it highlights how hard it is to find the right quarterback or to develop the right quarterback. Because Drew Allar, during the recruiting process, everybody wanted him. He has all of the physical tools that you could possibly want. And like, Clifford was an example of a guy who got things done. But you think about the most successful Penn State quarterback in the last 20 years is Trace McSorley,
Mm-hmm.
who
Yeah.
was a guy that James Franklin was recruiting at Vanderbilt, and he came with. Like, sometimes you just don't know.
You don't, and the threat of the quarterback run has been so good to Penn State. Like not so much the actual quarterback run, but the threat that this guy is going to take off. Drew scored Penn State's first touchdown with a quarterback draw that
Yeah.
just was kind of like, he was zigzagging.
I think everybody in the stadium knew it was coming, and Michigan couldn't stop it.
Yeah, and it's not like he can't run. We've seen guys that can't run. He can do a little bit of it, and he did more of it on Saturday, and that's the sort of thing that can open up your offense. But when you're not scared of that, your defense has an 11-on-10 advantage there. So that has been so good to Penn State over the years. Clifford, underrated athletically, able to pull the ball down and take some hits and things like that, and taking a few too many hits at times. But yeah, with him, with McSorley, it was so much different than with Allar and with Hackenberg, because that's the way that I think they were comfortable calling the game.
So where is the fan base mentally right now? The plateau is what it is. It's been this way since 2017. The change is structural coming next year. And it feels like maybe that's the difference they need. Maybe that makes things feel a little different, but I imagine it's pretty frustrating. It's basically Groundhog Day.
I don't think they're there yet. Like, I don't think the fan base is there yet. I don't think they're thinking about the difference in schedules. I think they're thinking that, hey, Penn State has not done well against Ohio State and Michigan, and those are the standards. And, even with the other teams coming in, they're going to continue to be the standard, because that's what we've known for so long in the Big Ten. So, like, I don't think they're quite there with ready to get over that hump, because, James Franklin's record in big games is what it is. It's not changing. It's not, you're not going to get an opportunity. If you go to the Peach Bowl and play Tulane, you're not going to get credit for that win, just as he didn't against Memphis a couple of years ago in the Cotton Bowl. Like, it's a situation where you're just continually trying to nip at the heels, and you're just not getting where you want to be. And that's all going to fall on the guy that's making $9 million. And, there's plenty of blame to go around, but it's going to start with that guy. And you can't blame Penn State fans for just sort of being in that mindset.
And it ain't Texas A&M. He's not getting that buyout. So
he is not.
He's got to figure it out.
65 million-ish, I think, is where they're at right now. Penn State does not have that oil money. They've got some natural gas money up north, but I don't think that's coming in to buy out a head coach.
Exactly. Sean Fitz, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Andy. Thank you for having me on. We're glad we got you to town this weekend.
Oh, well, hey, before I don't know if I'm messing with any of your sponsors, but Barrel 21.
Yes.
Was always one of my favorite places, but I had the poutine there on Friday night. Holy bone marrow gravy on fries with flash fried steak. Oh
man,
unbelievable!
How about it? And the folks at Otto's do a fantastic job. They that's their distillery there. But I've been going to Otto's since forever, man. They just they know how to do it.
Well, that's the thing. So if you're going to a game at Penn State, you get off the interstate on Atherton, and it's right there. You have Otto's, which is a giant sports bar. They brew their own beer. And you have Barrel 21, which is a little more kind of elevated bar food. And they also distill their own bourbon and rye. The Rock and Rye, if you get a chance to try that, try it. It is spectacular.
All right, I'll take your word for it. We're not really famous for the bourbons and the ryes up here in central Pennsylvania, but they do a good job, and I agree. Some of the best mixed drinks I've had have been in there. They do a terrific job.
And that has been traveling to State College, because I think people think, oh, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there. No. They'll take care of you.
All right. Well, I'm glad we took care of you this weekend. We're glad to get you on campus. I'm sorry to watch that offensive output, but that's kind of where we're at with covering this team.
That's okay. There's always creamery ice cream, and that's always a win. So thank you, Sean.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.